The Accidental Awakening. The transport shuttle descended through Velthora's iridescent atmosphere, and Dr. Elias Morgan pressed his face against the viewport like a child seeing snow for the first time. Below, forests pulsed with natural bioluminescence, sapphire blues bleeding into emerald greens, all shifting in rhythmic waves. He'd studied the planet's unique flora for years, but nothing prepared him for witnessing it in person. "Dr. Morgan, we're approaching the palace," the pilot announced. Elias adjusted his worn research jacket, suddenly conscious of how plain he must look. He was here for the plants, he reminded himself. A simple consultation about medicinal properties, in and out within a week. The palace rose from the landscape like a living crystal, its walls translucent and glowing from within. Guards with skin that shimmered like opals escorted him through corridors where the very air seemed to hum with energy. Everything was smooth curves and organic architecture, so different from Earth's angular constructions. "The Empress will see you in the royal gardens," a tall attendant informed him, her violet eyes assessing him with curiosity. Elias followed her through an archway into a paradise of impossible beauty. Flowers the size of his torso bloomed overhead, their petals releasing gentle clouds of luminescent pollen. Vines curled around pillars that seemed grown rather than built. And there, kneeling beside a pool of liquid silver, was Empress Syrian Ashkala. She was breathtaking. Her skin held a faint lavender undertone, and intricate patterns of darker purple traced along her exposed arms and collarbone, markings he recognized from his research as biographical, telling her life story in a language of light. Her hair fell in midnight waves to her waist, threaded with crystals that chimed softly as she moved. When she glanced up, her eyes were the deep violet of Velthora's twilight sky. "Dr. Morgan," she greeted her, her voice melodic. "Welcome to Velthora. I'm told you're an expert on our medicinal flora." "I've studied what little information reaches Earth, Your Majesty." Elias bowed awkwardly, unsure of the proper protocol. Syrian rose gracefully, moving toward a cluster of delicate flowers growing beside the pool's edge. The stones were slick with condensation, treacherous underfoot. She leaned forward to examine a particularly rare bloom, and Elias saw it happening in slow motion. Her foot sliding, her balance shifting. Instinct overtook protocol. He lunged forward, his hands catching her waist, steadying her before she could fall into the pool. The reaction was instantaneous. Where his skin touched hers, light exploded. The biographical marks along Syrian's arms blazed brilliant gold, racing across her skin like wildfire. She gasped, her whole body going rigid as waves of luminescence pulsed outward from the points of contact. The garden responded, every flower, every vine, every glowing pool flaring in sympathetic resonance. "Impossible," breathed the attendant behind them. Elias released Syrian immediately, stepping back in alarm. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to..." But Syrian was staring at him with wide eyes, her chest rising and falling rapidly. The golden light continued to dance across her skin, gradually fading to a warm amber glow. She lifted one hand, watching the pattern swirl and reform, spelling something in her people's light language. "The soul-bound," she whispered. "You are my soul-bound." The weight of those words settled over the garden like a physical presence. The attendant dropped to one knee. Guards appeared from nowhere, all bowing deeply. Elias stood frozen, utterly confused, as the most powerful woman on Velthora looked at him with an expression caught between wonder and fear. "I don't understand," Elias managed. Syrian's lips curved into a slight, uncertain smile. "Neither do I, Dr. Morgan. But it seems the universe has decided you're far more than a botanical consultant." She extended her hand toward him, and even from a distance he could feel the warmth radiating from her skin, could see the faint glow that still lingered around her. Something deep in his chest responded, a pull he couldn't name, shouldn't feel. Everything had changed with a single touch. And as the gardens hummed around them, Elias realized his simple week-long visit had just become something far more complicated, and perhaps far more extraordinary. Learning the ways. The guest chambers they'd assigned him were more luxurious than anywhere Elias had ever stayed. The walls seemed to breathe with soft light, and the bed was piled with fabrics that felt like sleeping on clouds, but luxury couldn't calm the storm of confusion in his mind. A soft chime announced a visitor. Syrian entered alone, having traded her formal robes for something simpler, a flowing dress that left her marked arms bare. The patterns still held traces of gold among the purple, faint but visible. "May I sit?" she asked, gesturing to the low couches near the window. "It's your palace, Your Majesty." "Syrian, please." She settled gracefully, tucking her legs beneath her. "I think we're past formalities now." Elias sat across from her, acutely aware of the space between them. "I need you to explain what happened in the garden. What is a soulbound?" She was quiet for a moment, gathering her thoughts. When she spoke, her voice was soft but steady. "My people evolved differently than yours. We're connected to the energy of our world in ways humans aren't. Once in our lifetime, if we're fortunate, we encounter someone whose energy resonates perfectly with our own, the soulbound, a mate chosen not by logic or arrangement, but by the very essence of who we are." "And the light show?" "My body recognized you before my mind could. The biographical marks, they record everything significant that happens to us. When you touched me, they recorded the most significant event of my life." Her fingers traced the patterns on her forearm absently. "They've never shown gold before. Gold is the color of bonding, of completion." Elias leaned back, processing. "This is insane. We just met. I'm human. I came here to study plants." "I know." Syrian's expression held sympathy and something deeper, uncertainty, perhaps even fear. "Do you think this is easy for me? I'm Empress of Velthora. I have duties, responsibilities, a council that expects me to make strategic alliances. And instead, the universe gives me a human botanist who knows nothing of our ways." The bluntness made him laugh despite everything. "When you put it that way." A smile tugged at her lips. "I'm not asking you to understand everything immediately, Elias, but I am asking you to stay, to learn about us, about this bond. You felt something too, didn't you, when you touched me?" He had. A warmth that spread through his chest, a sense of rightness he couldn't explain. Even now, sitting across from her, he felt drawn forward like a compass finding north. "What happens if I refuse?" Pain flickered across her face before she masked it. "Then you return to Earth, and I live the rest of my life knowing I found and lost my soulbound. It happens sometimes. Free will supersedes biology." The weight of that settled between them. Elias studied her, really looked at her. Beyond the ethereal beauty and royal bearing, he saw a woman carrying immense responsibility, someone who'd probably never had the luxury of choosing anything for herself. And now, for once, fate had chosen for her, and she was leaving the final decision to him. "I'll stay," he said quietly. "For now, to learn, to understand what this means." The relief that washed over her face was so profound it made his chest ache. "Thank you." The following days were a whirlwind. Syrian insisted he attend council meetings, sit beside her at ceremonial dinners, learn the basics of Velthoran customs. Her advisors watched him with expressions ranging from curiosity to barely concealed hostility. A human soul-bound was unprecedented. But it was the private moments that truly tested Elias's resolve.
During a state dinner, Syrian's hand brushed his while reaching for his glass. The brief contact sent warmth racing up his arm, and her biographical marks flickered gold for just an instant. She caught his gaze across the table, her violet eyes dark with something that made his breath catch. In the palace archives, she stood close behind him, explaining the light language written in ancient texts. Her breath warmed his neck, and he found himself leaning back instinctively, drawn to her presence. She didn't move away. Late one evening, she found him in the gardens where they'd first touched. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked, settling beside him on the stone bench. "Too much thinking." He gestured at the luminescent flowers around them. "This world, your people, everything is so different. And yet, it feels right being here, with you. That terrifies me." Syrian reached out, slowly, giving him time to pull away. When he didn't, she cupped his cheek with her palm. The touch ignited her marks in gold and amber, waves of light flowing across her skin. But this time, Elias felt it too, a warmth blooming in his chest, spreading outward until he could swear he was glowing from within. "I'm terrified too," she admitted. "I've ruled alone for 10 years, Elias. I learned to need no one, to be complete unto myself. And then you steadied me beside a pool, and suddenly I feel like I've been incomplete my entire life." He covered her hand with his, pressing her palm more firmly against his face. "What do we do about this?" "We stop fighting it. We see where this bond leads." The space between them felt electric, charged with possibility. Elias could count each of her quickened breaths, see the way her marks pulsed in time with what might have been her heartbeat. All he had to do was close the distance and... A discreet cough interrupted them. An advisor stood at the garden's entrance, apologetic but insistent. "Your Majesty, the council requires your presence." Syrian pulled back with visible reluctance. "Of course." She stood, then glanced back at Elias. "Tomorrow night, the Hall of Moons. There's something I want to show you." He nodded, not trusting his voice. As she walked away, her marks slowly fading from gold to their usual purple, Elias sat in the glowing garden and wondered what he'd gotten himself into. His simple research trip had become something impossible, something wonderful, something that felt increasingly like destiny.
The Ritual of Stars. The Hall of Moons was unlike anywhere Elias had seen in the palace. The domed ceiling was transparent, revealing Velthora's twin moons hanging luminous in the night sky. The floor was inlaid with crystals that captured and refracted their light, creating the illusion of standing among the stars themselves. Syrian waited at the center, dressed in a gown that seemed woven from moonlight itself. When she saw him, her marks brightened instinctively, and she didn't try to hide it anymore. "This is where Velthoran rulers have performed the bonding ceremony for thousands of years," she explained as he approached. "I thought you should see it, before you make any final decisions." "Final decisions?" She turned to face him fully. "The council met today. They're demanding the bonding ceremony be performed within the week, or they want you set back to Earth. They fear the political implications of an unbonded soul-bound situation. It makes me appear weak, indecisive." "That's ridiculous. That's politics." She moved closer, her expression vulnerable in the moonlight. "Elias, I won't force this. If you want to return to Earth, I'll defy the Council. I'll deal with the consequences. But I need to know, is there any part of you that wants to stay? Not because of destiny or biology, but because of me." He'd spent 3 sleepless nights wrestling with that question. The rational part of his brain screamed that this was madness. He'd known her less than a week. But his heart, his instincts, everything deeper than logic, pulled him toward her with undeniable force. "I barely know you," he said carefully, "but I want to. When you walk into a room, everything else fades.
When you smile, I forget to breathe. When you touch me, I feel like I'm finally home." He stepped closer, closing the distance between them. "Maybe that's the bonding talking, or maybe I'm just falling for you the old-fashioned way. Does it matter?" "No," she whispered. "It doesn't." Syrian closed the final gap between them, rising on her toes to press her lips to his. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, but when Elias wrapped his arms around her waist and pulled her closer, something ignited. Her marks erupted in brilliant gold, so bright that they illuminated the entire hall. He felt answering warmth flood through his body too, as if he carried light beneath his skin. She gasped against his mouth, her fingers tangling in his hair. "Elias!" He kissed her deeper, tasting something sweet like nectar, feeling the way her body curved perfectly against his. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, her marks were pulsing with golden light in steady, rhythmic waves. "That was," she laughed breathlessly. "I've read about bonding reactions, but experiencing it. I felt it too." He touched his chest, where warmth still bloomed, like something locked into place. Syrian took his hand, guiding it to rest over her heart. Beneath his palm, he felt not just her heartbeat, but something else. A resonance, a vibration that seemed to sync with his own pulse. This is what it means to be soulbound. Your energy, my energy, finding harmony. They stood together in the starlit hall, foreheads touching, breathing each other's air. Elias knew the rational choice would be to slow down, to think this through, but rationality had no place in what he felt for this woman. "Ask me," he said softly. "What ask you?" "What you brought me here to ask." Syrian pulled back just enough to meet his eyes. In the moonlight, with her marks glowing gold, she looked like something from a dream. "Elias Morgan of Earth, will you accept the soul-bound bond? Will you stand beside me not just as mate, but as partner in all things? Will you let our energies merge and become something greater than either of us alone?" His answer came without hesitation. "Yes." She kissed him again, and this time there was no hesitation, no holding back. His hands found the small of her back, the curve of her waist. Her fingers traced his jaw, his neck, learning the shape of him. When she pressed closer, he felt every line of her body against his, felt the heat building between them. "We should stop," she murmured against his lips, but made no move to pull away. "Should we?" He kissed down her jaw to her neck, felt her shiver in his arms. "The ceremony should come first. Tradition dictates." Her breath hitched as his mouth found a particularly sensitive spot. "Elias, tell me to stop." Instead, she pulled him down to the crystal floor with her, her moonlight gown pooling around them both. In the Hall of Moons, under twin satellites and scattered stars, they wrote their own tradition. His hands explored the patterns on her arms, her shoulders, discovering that tracing them made her gasp and glow brighter. Her touch ignited something primal in him, a need beyond mere physical desire. They moved together like a dance, learning each other's rhythms. When he kissed the marks on her collarbone, she arched beneath him with a soft cry. When she ran her hands down his chest, he felt that resonance in his heart strengthen, as if they were tuning to the same frequency. There, surrounded by refracted moonlight and the glow of her marks, they became something more than two separate beings. The bond solidified between them, gold light wrapping around them both like visible threads of fate. Later, lying tangled together on the crystal floor, Syrian traced lazy patterns on his chest. "The council will be scandalized that we bonded privately before the ceremony." Elias laughed. "Somehow, I think you're okay with scandalizing the council." "Perhaps." She propped herself up on one elbow, looking down at him with affection that made his chest tight. "No regrets?" He pulled her down for a slow, deep kiss. "Not even one." The ceremony would come in 3 days, but in every way that mattered, they were already bound. Two souls, two worlds, choosing each other against all logic and expectation.
Shadows and light.
Two worlds, one heart. The morning of the council vote, Elias woke to find investigators had discovered the source of the crop contamination, sabotage by Famvran's faction, designed to create a crisis they could blame on the human influence. The evidence was irrefutable. The council chamber was packed when they arrived. Syrian wore full ceremonial robes, her biographical marks gleaming with gold among the purple, a public declaration of her bonded status. Elias stood beside her throne, no longer a guest, but her acknowledged partner. Favran's face was ashen as the evidence was presented. His supporters abandoned him, one by one, seeing their political futures crumble. When the vote came, it was unanimous. The public bonding ceremony would proceed, and Elias would be formally recognized as consort of Velthora. "It seems," Syrian said to Elias as they left the chamber, "you've saved more than just crops." "We did it together," he corrected, "always together." The bonding ceremony took place 3 days later in the Hall of Moons, witnessed by thousands in person and millions more across Velthora through live broadcasts. Elias wore robes that matched Syrian's, traditional Velthoran designs modified to suit human physiology. The ceremony itself was beautiful and strange. They stood beneath the twin moons while a priestess painted their hands with luminescent ink. When their palms pressed together, the ink reacted with Syrian's natural bioluminescence, creating patterns that swirled up both their arms, his first biographical marks, recording this moment as the most significant of his life. "By the light of 2 moons and the bond of 2 souls," the priestess intoned, "I declare you eternally joined. 2 beings, 1 heart." When they kissed, the hall erupted in golden light. Syrian's marks blazed brilliant, and this time Elias's new marks responded in kind. The crowd cheered as bioluminescent petals rained down from the ceiling, a blessing from Velthora itself. The months that followed were a whirlwind of adjustment and joy. Elias learned to read light language, to navigate Velthoran politics, to stand beside Syrian as an equal partner in governance. His botanical expertise led to agricultural innovations that benefited both Velthora and Earth, opening new channels of cooperation between the worlds. But it was the private moments he treasured most. Mornings when he woke to find Syrian watching him, her marks glowing softly in the dawn light. "Good morning, my love," she'd whisper, snuggling closer. Afternoons in the gardens where they'd first touched, now expanded to include species from Earth. They'd walk hand in hand, her head on his shoulder, planning their future together. Evenings when state dinners ran long and they'd exchange glances across the table, silent conversations in the universal language of love. Later, in their shared chambers, they'd make up for lost time with touches and kisses that ignited their bond anew. Nights when they'd lie tangled together, her fingers tracing the biographical marks that now decorated his arms. "They're beautiful on you," she'd murmur, "a record of our love." "Tell me what they say," he'd ask, and she'd translate the story of the day they met, their first kiss, their bonding, every significant moment preserved in light and memory. 6 months after the ceremony, Elias stood in the gardens at sunset, watching the flowers respond to the falling darkness by glowing brighter. Syrian found him there, slipping her arms around his waist from behind. "Thinking?" she asked, resting her chin on his shoulder. "About how different my life is now. 6 months ago, I was a lonely botanist who'd convinced myself I was happy alone. Now I'm consort to an empress, living on an alien world, and somehow happier than I ever imagined possible." She turned him to face her, her violet eyes luminous in the growing darkness. "Any regrets?" "Only that I didn't stumble on those slippery stones myself. Would have saved us both some time." She laughed, the sound he'd never tire of hearing.
ever the romantic. You made me this way. You and your universe-altering touch. Our touch, she corrected, taking his hand. Where their skin met, both their marks glowed golden, a constant, visible reminder of their bond, forever. Around them, the garden pulsed with bioluminescent life. Blues and greens and purples and golds, all the colors of Velthora singing in harmony. Elias kissed his empress, his soul-bound, his eternal partner, and felt complete in a way he'd never known was possible. They'd come from different worlds, different species, different lives entirely. But one accidental touch had rewritten both their destinies, proving that love, whether driven by biology, fate, or simple human emotion, was the most powerful force in any universe. As Velthora's twin moons rose overhead, Elias and Sirian stood together in their glowing garden, two souls bound by light and love, facing whatever the future held as one. The story of the human botanist and the alien empress became legend across both their worlds, a reminder that sometimes the most extraordinary things begin with the simplest gesture, a steadying hand, an unexpected connection, and the courage to believe in something impossible. Together, they proved that impossible was just another word for not yet achieved. And in the luminescent nights of Velthora, their love glowed eternal.